Okay. I guess old camera needs to come down some. Oh. Jeff, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
You sound like I'm clearing my throat every other breath.
Yeah,
Mother of all colds.
Yeah, I found out yesterday I have the flu. So,
Oh man.
Oh, what fun!
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's why I joined without the camera tonight. No need to traumatize everyone with my appearance.
Well, I had the flu about 3 years ago, and it was really a mild version. This cold has been rougher than that flu was, but no, I'd rather have a cold than the flu. Sorry you have it.
Yeah, this is the first time I've had it in probably 10 or 15 years, and I had forgotten how uncomfortable it truly is.
Do you get the flu shots each year?
I did not. Shame on me.
Funny, I get it every year, and my wife refuses to ever get them. And guess who gets the flu? Perfect wall. I've got some Tic Tacs in my mouth. They keep me from coughing so much.
Yeah.
Apologize for that. Well, are you near any of the flooding?
No, I'm actually in Starkville, so it's
okay.
Yeah, so it's been, I mean, there's some flooding out at the local county lake due to the
county.
Yeah, yes, yeah. The dam out there the levee is in poor shape, so they're trying to battle that, but nothing like what's going on in Jackson.
I got my bachelor's and master's at State. In fact, that's where I met my wife.
Oh, nice.
And we lived for a while in some really old apartments near the downtown. If you call Jackson, Starkville having a downtown place called Cooterville.
Mm-hmm.
Some old guy had built these from scratch many years ago. It was something else. It was $52.50 a month, and that included utilities. It was unreal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. $52.50 a month.
That was, that was in the 70s. But even back then, I mean,
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah,
Star has changed from when we were there.
it really has. I've been here all of my life, but or most of my life, it's home. And
It's a nice area.
mhm.
I remember when I was in undergrad school, guys would make a run to the county line to get Coors.
Yes, they were still doing that when I was in high school.
That's funny.
Oh, it's a small place, small world.
The sports fortunes have changed positively, I'm glad to say.
Yes, me too.
When I was there 3 seasons and won like 2 games.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was terrible. I mean, football.
Wow. Yeah, they definitely, they've come a long way over the years. And we're expecting big things out of the new coach.
I have a brother-in-law in Texas that's a state graduate and a rabid maroon and white fan. He used to drag me up there for the scrimmage game in the spring.
Right.
And I'm sure he could tell me all about he could tell me everything about this new coach from his
yeah.
street. He was a sports information nut in high school, and it followed him into adult life.
Oh.
I've got 3 minutes till. I usually have several other people chiming in.
Yeah, that's kind of odd to just be the two of us.
Yeah.
But these meetings are so beneficial. I mean, they really help.
I've had a lot of students tell me that. I think of them as warm-ups,
Mm-hmm.
Brian? Oh, he's not hooked in yet. There he is. Hey, good evening. Have you got your microphone on?
I'm sorry, I had it muted.
I was talking with Jeff. It's like a couple of minutes till. We thought we might be a class of 1.
I lost track of time. I had everything set up.
Bailey, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good. Briante, good evening.
I'm trying to see if I need a hat on.
I don't think so. I'm going to stall for another couple of minutes to see if anybody else chimes in. This may be it.
I didn't think I was gonna get my my thing in time because I just got back from Chile today.
Back from where?
Chile, South America.
Oh my God.
Chile.
Chile.
Yes.
Did your company fly you down there?
No, I have a friend who works like as a flight attendant, and so
Yeah.
I was able to go down there that time. So it was good. Good way to celebrate a birthday and a Valentine's Day.
One of my wife's sisters was a flight attendant for, what was it? I believe it was United. So every now and then, free flights you know?
Yeah.
Well, guys, I've got 7 o'clock. I think I'll start. Lori, good evening.
Good evening.
These 2 chapters that we're going to look at this coming week deal with working capital, management of current assets and current liabilities. And I've prepared something just to give you a preview. Chapter 16 basically deals with general working capital, the management of, the whole working capital cycle, the management of accounts payable. We don't get into inventory management. That's covered thoroughly in another course in the program. Then chapter 27 deals with both credit policy and with the cost of bank financing. You'll see. If I can remember how to make this work. And by the way, guys, I am so sorry I didn't make it last week, but I could not stop coughing and sneezing. You would have gotten nothing out of last week had I tried to conduct a class. All right, our primary current assets are cash, marketable securities, receivables, and inventories. Primary current liabilities are accounts payable, notes payable, and accruals. Accounts receivables, of course, is what our customers owe us. Everybody sells on credit. Accounts payable is what we owe our suppliers. Notes payable is another name for short-term bank loans. And then the primary 2 categories of accruals are accrued wages and salaries and accrued taxes. You know, you pay your workers every 2 weeks. If they work 1 week, you owe them a week's wages. So that shows up under the liability accruals. And tax payments to the federal government are made quarterly. So if you've earned profit for a couple of months, then you've incurred the liability of, I guess you could call it, taxes payable. And that shows up under accruals. The first thing I wanted to show you that your author shows you is a way to profile the working capital cycle. It's something called a cash conversion cycle. And it actually profiles the process in terms of days rather than dollars. The cash conversion cycle has 3 components: the inventory conversion period, the receivables collection period, and the payables deferral period. And it's easier to explain what these are with the next graph. A company receives, let's say we're a manufacturer. We receive raw materials from a supplier. We use the raw materials to make a finished good and then make a sale. So the time that elapses between when we receive the raw materials, make a finished good, and make a sale is called the inventory conversion period. Then the time between when we make a sale and we collect is called the receivables collection period. Back in your ratio chapter, the receivables collection period was also called days sales outstanding. The average amount of time between when you make a sale and when you collect. And our suppliers give us credit, I don't know, net 30, net 20, some amount of time between when we purchase raw materials and when we have to pay them. So this time gap between when we have to pay our suppliers and when we collect from our customers, that's what's called the cash conversion cycle. Or it may also simply be known as the cash cycle. Now, to get a better grip on this, we'll work with some numbers. And you guys have got these slides, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah, I have them.
cool. Because you need them for these financial statements. Here are the balance sheets for the last 2 years, the income statements. So and this, I call this MD Corporation. For MD Corporation, for this most recent year, 2020, let's determine the cash conversion cycle components and then the cash conversion cycle. And forgive me, I need to peek. I've got 2 sets of slides, yours and mine. Apologize for that. Okay. The inventory conversion period is found by taking inventories times 365 over cost of goods sold. So for this most recent year, let's see, what color do I have here? Black will do, I guess. The inventory conversion period, which is inventories times 365. Inventories are 615 times 365. Divide that by the cost of goods sold, which is 2,600. I'm pausing for a second. Can you guys locate these numbers for 2020? Inventories, of course, would come off the balance sheet. Cost of goods sold off the income statement. And this works out to 86.3 days. So for our company, on average, it takes 86.3 days between when they receive raw materials, make a finished good, and make a sale. Then the inventory conversion period, pardon me, the receivables collection period, which is the same thing as day sales outstanding. It's receivables times 365 over sales. So for this current year, receivables are 375 and sales are 3,000. So the receivables collection period is 45.6 days. On average, it takes 45.6 days between when they make a sale and when they collect. Then the payables deferral period, hello, is accounts payable times 365 over cost of goods sold. Guys, am I writing too small for you to see?
Nope, looks good.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, you're good.
Never know. All right, the accounts payable is 60. And we divide that by cost of goods sold. Whoops. And we get a payables deferral period of 8.4 days. That's the average amount of credit we're getting from our suppliers. Between when we purchase raw materials, on average, we have to pay in 8.4 days. So the cash conversion cycle is the inventory conversion period plus the receivables collection period minus the payables deferral period. In our case, 86.3 days plus 45.6 minus 8.4 gives us a cash conversion cycle of 123.5 days. Why am I doing that? The cash conversion cycle is a time gap we have to finance. It's the average amount of time that passes between when we have to pay our suppliers and when we collect from our customers. We want that to be shorter. Since it's a time gap we have to finance, we want it to be shorter. If it's shorter, that reduces how much funding we have to come up with. Or in terms of our schematic, this is our company's situation for 2020. So it profiles the whole process between when we receive raw materials, produce a finished good, and make a sale. Whoa. Between when we make a sale and when we collect, how much credit our suppliers give us, and then, of course, that gap we have to finance. Companies constantly strive to reduce their cash conversion cycle. So one of the things that's useful is to be able to convert days to dollars. For example, what if MD could shorten its inventory conversion period by 10 days, maybe through greater coordination with its suppliers, such as using just-in-time systems, so that raw materials don't arrive until they can be put into the production process. That would reduce raw materials inventories. What if they could do this without affecting cost of goods sold? If you can shave 10 days off the inventory conversion period without affecting cost of goods sold, that's going to generate some cash. It will generate some permanent cash. If we take our inventory conversion period formula and rearrange it, that gives us inventories. Inventories are the inventory conversion period times cost of goods sold over 365. So, what would be our revised level? Here we go. Of inventories if we shave 10 days off our inventory conversion period. Now, the inventories with the formula rearranged would be the inventory conversion period times cost of goods sold over 365. So if we can cut that inventory conversion period down from, what was it, 86.3 days to, what would that be?
76.3.
76.3? Yeah. Without affecting our cost of goods sold, our revised inventory level, and I'm rounding if that's okay, would be 544. If these are mil, 544 mil. Now, how much cash does that generate? Well, the cash generated would be equal to how much inventories are reduced. So first we find the change in inventories. The new level would be 544. The old level was, what, 615? So inventories would drop, if those are mil, by $71 million. That would be a permanent drop in the level of inventories, the average level we keep. How much cash would that generate?
Positive 77,
Yep.
71.
Ever how much inventories drops, that's how much cash would increase. Or in terms of the T accounts, over here we've got cash, we've got inventories. Let's see, cash for our company was what, 10 mil. Inventories was 615. If we can cut our inventory conversion period down by 10 days, inventories will drop to that new level, 544. That's a change, a drop of 71 mil. And other things held constant, cash would go up by 71 mil. If the company doesn't need the extra cash, then they can use it whatever way they want. They can pay off some debt. They can use it for expansion. But this is a rather neat way to convert days to dollars. Now, what do companies do to try to reduce their inventory conversion period? Well, they try to minimize their raw materials inventories through things such as just in time. Have an arrangement with suppliers where they don't receive raw materials until they're ready to be put into the production process. So that reduces raw materials inventories. And believe it or not, for manufacturers, companies try to find a way to make it faster. Reduce the amount of time it takes to make the product from raw materials to finished goods. That'll reduce goods in process inventories. And another thing companies have shifted to doing is sell by order or special order. Basically, don't make it until you've already got it sold. Dell was the one that created this whole process. They're the masters of managing the cash conversion cycle. But the point is, if you've already got the item sold, then as soon as it's a finished good, it's shipped. And that keeps finished goods inventories down to a minimum. So there's several things that companies try to do to minimize their inventory conversion period so that they minimize their cash conversion cycle. Are you with me so far?
Yes, sir.
It's a lot to absorb, but it's really useful information. Okay. What if our company, through more diligent oversight of overdue accounts, could shorten its receivables collection period by 8 days without affecting sales? How much cash would that generate? We're kind of going through the same process that we did with the inventory conversion period. First, if you rearrange the receivables collection period formula to solve for receivables, this is what you get. Now, if MD could shorten its receivables collection period by 8 days, how much cash would it generate? The receivables collection period formula rearranged to solve for receivables would be the receivables collection period times sales over 365. So if we could shorten the receivables collection period, I believe it was 45.6 days. Am I right?
Yes.
If we could knock 8 days off of that, that would knock it down to 37.6 days times sales over 365. That would give us a revised level of receivables of 309. Just like inventories, if we can reduce our investment in an asset like receivables or inventories, the amount that investment in the asset drops is how much cash would go up. So first, we look at the change in receivables. It was 375, I think. So receivables would drop by look at that. I say the word, but I don't write it. 370, there we go. Receivables would drop by 66 mil. The change in cash, well, ever how much receivables drops, that's how much cash would go up. As long as they sustain that shorter receivables collection period, that 66 million is a permanent source of funding. in terms of your T accounts. From this item alone, cash was 10 mil. Receivables was 375. So if they could pull this off, receivables would drop to 309, or a drop of 66 mil. And that's how much cash would go up. There has been an enormous emphasis on improving the cash conversion cycle, really for the last 20 years, ever since Dell showed everyone how it's done. This is not small potatoes. It can involve a huge amount of money. And of course, if we reduce our receivables collection period, that also reduces the cash conversion cycle. Now, companies have to be careful in terms of their efforts to reduce the receivables collection period. In this example, I suggested that the company simply becomes more diligent with collecting overdue accounts. You, of course, could shorten your terms to customers. If you've been giving them terms of net 30, you could try to change it to net 20, but that might cost some sales. Later tonight, we'll look at changes in credit terms and how it might affect the company's profits. But for now, we're assuming that the company simply became more diligent with collecting overdue accounts. Questions at this point? All right, guys, I'm going to take your silence as golden.
Sounds good.
Finally, of course, we'd like to have longer to pay our suppliers. The wrong way to do this is to start paying them late. That can damage our credit rating. And, you know, if the suppliers have had enough of it, they could cut off trade credit and make us pay cash. So I'm assuming MD, through its market power, could negotiate an additional 5 days of credit. Instead of having to pay in 8.4 days, they could take 5 days longer. Now, if you take your payables deferral period formula and rearrange it to solve for your accounts payable, this is what you get. So, payables are the payables deferral period times cost of goods sold over 365. I did that right. Yeah. They've been getting 8.4 days of credit from suppliers. If they could negotiate another 5 days, then that would put the payables deferral period up at 13.4 days. Assuming this didn't affect cost of goods sold, our revised accounts payable would be 95. And in this case, accounts payable is a liability, not an asset. So whatever the increase is in accounts payable, that's how much cash would go up. So we look at the change in accounts payable. It was, what, 60. If we push it up to 95, that gives us another 35 million bucks of trade credit from our suppliers, and the change in cash would equal the change in accounts payable. So cash would also go up by 35 mil. In terms of your T account, cash is over here, accounts payable is over here. If cash was 10 million and we did nothing except focus on these longer terms, then accounts payable would go up to what, 95, an increase of 35 mil, and that's how much cash would go up. Companies are constantly striving to reduce their cash conversion cycle. They're trying to increase their, shorten their inventory conversion period, shorten their receivables collection period, and lengthen their payables deferral period. If our company did these three things collectively, I'm not prepared for this, but let's look at it. The additional cash, sorry. The cash from the change in inventories would be, forgive me, I'm doing this one on the fly. How much was it? 71 mil? The cash generated from the change in the receivables, in receivables, the receivables collection period, and therefore receivables, was, in our example,
66 mil.
66, yeah, 66 mil. And the cash from the change in accounts payable, the increase in accounts payable was what, 35?
Yes, sir.
If they could do all three of these things, forgive me, my little pea brain can't add three numbers like that. Shameful. That generate 172 mil. As long as they could sustain the revised inventory conversion period, receivables collection period, and payables deferral period, that would be like an interest-free loan that they never have to pay back. And as long as we're there, what would be the revised cash conversion cycle if they could pull this off? The inventory conversion period would be cut down to, sorry about the page flipping, guys, 76.3 days. the receivables collection period would be cut down to 37.6 days. And the payables deferral period would be lengthened to 13.4 days. Again, the calculator. Now I'm getting 100.5 days. And I think our original cash conversion cycle was, what, 123.5? The key thing I wanted you to see from this is not just that you can profile the process in days, but you can see how days can be converted to dollars if you can improve the cash conversion cycle, shorten the inventory conversion period, shorten the receivables collection period, legitimately lengthen the payables deferral period.
Do you foresee a case in which the revised cash from inventory, cash from receivable accounts, or cash from accounts payable becomes a negative number? Like it would be detrimental?
Yep. If you're managing things poorly, definitely. For
Okay.
example, what would happen to a company's inventory level if they found they can't sell their inventories? What would happen to finished goods? It would climb, right? And if inventories increase, well, think of it on the balance sheet. If you see inventories go up, did the company purchase more inventories or sell more? They purchased more. So which way was the cash going? Out.
Right.
Good question. Or if the company got sloppier in managing overdue accounts, receivables could go up. That would be cash out. So yeah, these things can turn negative, where they actually cost more cash instead of generating it. But the goal, of course, is to shorten that cash conversion cycle whatever way we can. Now, let me ask you a question. What would it mean if I told you that Dell's cash conversion cycle was a negative number? I'm just making this up. I've looked it up, but what would it mean if the cash conversion cycle is negative?
Would it mean that they're paying their accounts payable before they even finish selling the product?
Actually, the other way around.
Okay.
They'd be collecting from their customers before they had to pay their suppliers. So working capital, instead of being something they have to finance, it would be actually a source of funds. For our company, even with their improvement, they still have to pay their suppliers 100 days before they collect from their customers. See, that's where notes payable comes in. That's the function of short-term bank loans, is to finance the cash conversion cycle gap. You have to borrow money to be able to pay their suppliers 100 days before they collect from their customers. But if they had a negative cash conversion cycle, which, by the way, several companies have now. That means they actually collect from their customers before they have to pay their suppliers.
So they're just cash flowing it?
Well,
Sorry.
think about it. With Dell, if you order a computer from Dell online, when do you pay?
I guess when
Right
you
then and
order
there.
it. Yeah. Unless you're using a credit
Right,
card.
right when you make the order. When do you get the computer? 2 or 3 weeks later. So you're actually paying them before they even have a finished product. That's what helps make their cash conversion cycle negative. I don't know if you follow what I'm saying, but the key point is, if you could work that cash conversion cycle down to where it was negative, where you literally collected from your customers before you had to pay your suppliers, instead of it being something you have to fund, instead of being a 100-day gap you have to fund, it actually is a source of funds. You get the money 30 days before you have to pay it out to your suppliers. Dell has a negative cash conversion cycle, HP, Amazon. A lot of companies have strived for this because it's big bucks. The average company invests more in working capital than they do in fixed assets. Well, I've talked enough about that. Any questions about this? My head keeps going back to my lecture notes, and I've got tons of stuff in there that you will see when you go through the slides that I'm not covering in this little preview. All right, ready to move on?
Yes, sir.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. Switching away from this global view of the working capital process, the cash conversion cycle, to looking at our accounts one at a time. Sorry about this, sinuses. Companies, of course, do hold some cash and marketable securities. The cash supports daily transactions. The marketable securities are a temporary place to park cash prior to making major payments. You know, if you've got a construction project going on, but you're not going to have to make a payment for several months, but you've sold the bond issue to cover it, you're not going to just sit on the cash. You're going to invest it in something, but typically something safe. And some companies like to sit on cash to be able to move quickly if something comes up. Believe it or not, Ford would typically sit for several years on $50 million in cash for this purpose, so that they could make an acquisition if they decided the time was suddenly ripe. All right, forgive me, I'm BSing right now, all right? So one account is cash and marketable securities. When it comes to marketable securities, there are several features that marketable securities typically have. They have a short maturity. They'll have a high rating, low risk of default. They'll be liquid. There'll be an active secondary market. That market will be broad. There'll be a large number of buyers, and the buyers will have deep pockets. For example, one such marketable security that corporations may invest in are T-bills. Do T-bills have a high rating? Theoretically, what's the risk of default with T-bills? Well, T-bills are the obligation of our federal government. So if you have to worry about T-bills defaulting, there will be more serious things to worry about. Let's say your corporation buys a 30-day T-bill, maybe puts 10 million in some 30-day T-bills. Can they sell them before 30 days? Yeah, they're liquid. There's an active secondary market. If you bought some T-bills or 30-day T-bills, you've had them a week and you're ready to sell them, you just contact your broker. And you get a competitive price because there's a large number of buyers that have deep pockets. But the most important feature of T-bills as a marketable security is the short maturity, because the short maturity ensures price stability. Brief example, okay? Brief example. Let's take, oh, I don't know. Let's say we've got a 20-year bond, $1,000 par, big surprise. They're all $1,000 par. It's got a 10% annual coupon, European style, makes annual coupon payments. And just for simplicity, let's make the math really easy. Let's say the yield is 10%. So what would be the price of the bond? $20-year bond, yielding 10%, paying $100 in coupon payments. The price would be a nice even $1,000. It'd be a par value bond. Okay. Now, what if yields immediately jump to, I don't know, 13%? We might as well use outlandish numbers if we're going to play with this. If yields jump to 13%, what happens to the value of this bond? Now I have to have the calculator. I'm getting 789 rounding.
Yes.
Well, that'd be a loss of like, what, 211? Okay. Notice what are we dealing with? 20-year bond. Now, just to keep the math easy, what if we're now looking at a 1-year bond? Same features, $1,000 par, 10% coupon rate. The only difference is the maturity. This bond also, if yields were 10%, this bond also would sell at par. Whoops, got carried away there. Now, what if the same thing happens? If yields jump to 13%, does the price of this bond fall? Yeah. Yields and bond prices move in opposite directions. But it only falls to 973. Instead of a $200 loss, you've only got a $27 loss. What is it that causes the price to be a lot more stable with the second bond than the first one? The short maturity. And if I carry this even further, like the average T-bill new T-bill has a maturity of 30 days. If I cut this even further, and I didn't want to do it because the math gets messy, but you get an even more stable price. So the key thing that makes marketable securities, the key feature they have to have is a short maturity. So investing in long-term corporate bonds of other companies won't do. Even investing in long-term treasury bonds won't do. You have to have the short maturity to have that stable price. And when you put money into marketable securities, your emphasis is on preserving value. You're simply wanting to park the money, briefly earn a small return, but preserve the amount of money that's in there. Any questions on that? You're getting a nickel tour because this is a preview. Another account, working capital account, I'm flipping from assets to liabilities, forgive me for that, but as accruals. As I mentioned earlier, the primary two sources of accruals are accrued wages and accrued taxes. The primary advantage of accruals is it's spontaneous. Remember, anything on, let's see if I can do this without blowing everything up. Anything on the right-hand side of the balance sheet, like accruals, is a source of funds. Now, I said it's spontaneous because as your company grows, what will happen to your wages? Well, you hire more people, so your accrued wages and salaries will be bigger. And as you're more profitable, as you get bigger and are more profitable, your accrued taxes will be bigger. So the nice thing about accruals, it's spontaneous. As your company grows, it grows, so it provides more financing. The disadvantage of accruals, you can't manage it. You can't try to manipulate it. You pay your workers every 2 weeks. If you suddenly decide to make them wait a third week, they're not going to like it at all. And if you try to stretch out your tax payments to the federal government, they have no sense of humor on that at all. They're going to have to be paid on time. So the nice thing about accruals, it's a spontaneous source of funds. As your company grows, this source of funding, this liability will automatically grow. But you can't try to manipulate it. Another working capital account is accounts payable. What you owe your suppliers. This is an extremely important source of funding. For most companies, it's the single largest liability, single largest source of funding. And of course, for smaller companies, it may be the only source of funding. At least more important. Small companies can't sell bonds. They can't sell marketable securities. So they rely more heavily on credit from their suppliers, accounts payable. Accounts payable is a spontaneous source of funds. As your business grows, your purchases will increase, so your accounts payable balance will increase. And of course, accounts payable, because it's a liability, is a source of funding. So as I've demonstrated here at the bottom, if your company grows, your purchases will grow, so your accounts payable will grow, and that will help fund your growth. Something we want to do with accounts payable that we're not doing with the other sources is look at its cost. Your supplier gives you terms of 210 net 30, which means what?
I cannot remember.
If you pay, hey,
By
I
day 10,
I
there's
love admission, no ego. I love that. Best student I ever had absolutely zero ego. She would, and it was a she would say stuff in class where you thought her mind was circling Mars. You would think she didn't have a clue. And then exam after exam after exam, 100. But she wasn't saddled with any kind of ego. She would ask any question. I love it. Okay, 210 net 30. If you purchase goods and pay within 10 days, you get what?
discount.
2% discount. Otherwise, the whole amount's due on day 30. All right. Now, if you'll notice down here, I have a formula that gives us the cost of foregoing the discount. You know, you can either pay in 10 days or you can pay on the final due date. But what if MD's suppliers, without any animosity, without any bad feelings, allow them to pay 5 days late, 5 days past the final due date? If that is the case, these may be the stated terms, but the enforced terms would actually be what? 210 net.
15?
Well, if they let you pay 5 days past the due,
35.
35.
35. Okay, so I think
There
I
you
think
go.
like-
It is not the stated terms that matter in terms of your cost of funding. It's the enforced terms. So the enforced terms are 210 net 35. To show you how this works, forgive me, but I'm going to go to the whiteboard because my pen goes nuts on the PowerPoint slides. So our enforced terms are 210 net 35. Let's arbitrarily assume the price of an item is $100. Okay? If you pay cash, that is, if you pay within 10 days, what's the actual price? If you pay within 10 days, they knock off 2%, so the cash price would be $88.
That's right.
98.
98.
Okay. How much more are you paying if you skip the discount? Another, what?
$2.
$2. Now, if we had a whole year to pay, then I'd stop right there, 2 over 98. But how much additional credit, how many additional days are we getting?
25.
25. And this works out to, it'll come out decimal, but it works out to an interest rate you're paying your supplier of nearly 30%. When discounts are offered by suppliers, they're typically structured so that it is extremely expensive to skip the discount. And that's for the nominal cost. The effective cost is 1 plus the dollar fees over dollar proceeds raised to the 365 over n minus 1. Actually, look, let me show you. Sorry, I jumped ahead on you a little bit. There's the effective cost formula, right? What is the difference between nominal cost and effective cost? What is the difference between a bank account that states the interest rate is 5%, but they compound interest daily? How much does your money grow by? More than 5%. The effective cost, think of it as taking interperiod compounding into effect. Just like a bank account that says we're going to pay you 5%, but we're going to compound the interest daily, you know you're getting a return higher than 5%. So if we take the effective cost into account for our, I'll do it this way. We're paying $2 more to borrow 98 for an additional 25 days. And that works out to an even more expensive source of funding. Golly, Michael. So whether you ignore the intra-period compounding or take it into account, typically skipping the discount offered by suppliers is very expensive. Just for grins, one other quick one, okay? What if we've got terms are 110, net 40, but we're allowed to pay 15 days late without penalty? What would be our nominal cost? What would be our effective cost? Again, assume a arbitrary price of $100. That's the price of the item. So going back and looking at our formula for the nominal cost, it'd be the dollar fees over the dollar proceeds. What's the cash price of this item?
$1/99, correct?
Correct. Well, the cash price would be 99. And how much more are you paying to delay payment to skip the discount? Another buck.
$1.
And the enforced terms are actually 110 net, what, 55?
Yes.
So how many more days are you allowed to delay payment if you forgo the discount?
45.
Another 45 days. And that works out to, well, 8.2% nominal. And of course, the effective would be let me catch up, guys. I just made that one up. I don't have a check figure prepared. $8.5. Are you with me so far on this?
Yes, sir.
You got the 45 in the denominator by saying 40 plus 15 is 55, and then you subtract 10 and get 45.
Yeah. Well, look, what they're enforcing are terms of 110 net 45. So we get 10 days free. If we forgo the discount, that gives us another 45 days. So in a sense, 45 days is the loan period.
Okay.
All right, let's
Doctor-
go
Doctor,
ahead.
Is it safe to assume that the effective will always be higher than the nominal?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Sarah, it will. I mean, unless you got some crazy company that gives terms of like one, oh, golly, I can't even come up with an example. Yes. The effective will always be higher than the nominal. Just like with a bank account, if they give you a stated interest rate on an account, a savings account, but they compound interest daily, your money's actually going to grow. Let's say if the stated rate's 3%, your money's going to actually grow at more than 3%. And the effective rate would be how much your money grows. All right. Now let's shift gears to the other chapter. Chapter 27, which primarily deals with credit policy and the costs of bank loans. Now, credit policy, this deals with how you manage your credit customers, your accounts receivable. The tools of credit policy are the terms, the discount if you offer one, and then the payment period, you know, something like 210 net 30. Your credit standards. Companies will, if their terms are net 30, they're not going to let anybody that walks in the door walk out with their goods with an open promise to pay in 30 days. So companies have to make, they'll run a credit analysis on their potential customers and decide which ones are strong enough to receive trade credit and which ones they'll make pay cash. And then, of course, another tool of credit policy is how tough do you get with the overdue accounts? Just to give you an example of a problem, let's say we've got a company and their current credit policy is based on terms of net 30. They project that with this credit policy, for the coming year, they'll have sales of 5 million. Their day sales outstanding will be 35 days because not everybody's going to pay on time. They project bad debt losses of 2%. I'm keeping the numbers low if you guys don't mind. If I stick millions in there, then we have to resort to a bunch of zeros and really small font. Let's say the cost of operating the credit department is $10,000 a year. Two other things. Their variable cost ratio is 70%, which means if they produce and sell another item for $100, it only costs an additional $70 to make it. And their interest rate on short-term loans is 6%. We can assume that the company finances, oh, here we go, its receivables with short-term debt. So if it does something to change its investment in receivables, to increase it, for example, then the company would have to borrow more money, and that would generate interest expense. They're considering moving to a more lax policy and offering a discount. They're considering moving to terms of 210 net 30. And I didn't lay it out here clearly, but they're also considering offering trade credit to a potentially weaker group of customers. And the combination of offering the discount and offering trade credit to more customers, they believe will generate another $500,000 in sales. Their sales for the coming year will be $5.5 million instead of $5 million. They believe that 80% of their customers will take the discount, and day sales outstanding will be 15 days. Some will pay in 10, some will pay in 30, some will pay after 30. To keep track of the discount and some other paperwork, their credit department costs are expected to be $30,000 for the year. And because they're offering trade credit to a weaker group of customers to pick up more sales, their bad debt loss rate is expected to be higher, 3% of sales. This is a whole lot of information to absorb. And our job is to figure out a way to analyze it that's simple. What we want to do is use an incremental approach. Look at the change in certain items. We want to look at every item that would land on the income statement. And then we'll net them out to see if profits would be expected to go up or go down. Now, if they go with a new policy, gross profits ought to go up. Keep in mind that if your variable cost ratio is 70%, then your gross profit margin would be the other 30%. So we look at the change in sales. Whoops. Okay. Let's go to the whiteboard for this. Okay, so one item that lands on the income statement is gross profit. The change in gross profit would be the change in sales times our gross profit margin. If we switch to the new policy, what is the expected change in sales? Up or down, for one thing? Up, and by how much?
$500,000.
$500,000. If our variable cost ratio is 70%, then our gross profit margin would be the other 30%. So we would expect gross profits to go up by $150,000. Another item that would land on the income statement would be our discount cost. Now, our discount cost would be the discount cost under the new policy minus what we thought they would be under the old policy. Under the new policy, we're forecasting sales of $5.5 million. And the discount we're offering is 2%. If everybody took the discount, that would be our new discount cost. But what percent of our customers are we expecting to take the discount?
80%.
80%. Yeah, sorry about my writing here. And what is our projected discounts costs under the old credit policy? Are we even offering a discount under the old policy? No. So we expect the discount cost to be zip. So our discount costs would go up. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think that works out to 88,000. Another item that would hit the income statement would be bad debts. Again, we're going to look at bad debts under the new policy minus what we think they would be if we stayed with the old policy. Under the new policy, we're expecting a bad debt loss rate of how much?
100%.
3%.
3% on sales of 5.5 mil, right? If we stayed with the old policy, we would be looking at a bad debt loss rate of
2%.
2% on sales of 5 mil. I come up with an increase in bad debt losses of 65,000. And another item that would land on our income statement would be the credit department costs. Under the new policy, 30,000. Under the old, what was it? 10, I think. So we'd expect credit department costs to go up by 20,000. Now, something that doesn't land on the income statement is accounts receivables. But accounts receivables is funded by debt, and the interest expense on debt does land on the income statement. So I'm going to sort of take a little sidebar here to see what the change would be in our receivables at cost. We're going to multiply our variable cost ratio by, and I don't know if you remember this from earlier, but receivables are sales per day times day sales outstanding. I know this is a rush and your head's hurting from it, but when we finish it, I think you'll be able to handle the other problems. Under the new policy, we would have sales, let me erase a little of that. Well, I'll do it this way. All right, that would be sales under the new policy times days sales outstanding under the new policy minus sales under the old policy times days sales outstanding under the old policy. Our variable cost ratio is
70%.
70, right? I think.
Mhm.
And Our sales under the new policy would be 5.5 mil per day times the day sales outstanding of what under the new policy?
15.
15 days. See, this is actually giving us what our receivables would be under the new policy. Under the old policy, sales would be 5 mil with a day sales outstanding of 35 days. Now, if we crank this out, and I didn't make this intermediate calculation, but I'm about to give it to you. 5.5 mil per day times 15 days. It's not a nice round number, but I'm coming up with 226,027. Had we stayed with our old policy, it would have been 5 mil per day times 35. I'm getting 479, 452. So receivables would actually drop because under the new policy, they're paying faster. I may have this. Yeah. I don't know what I just did. But receivables would drop by 253, 425 at cost. Now, whatever our receivables are at cost is how much we have to finance with short-term debt. So if our receivables go down, we borrow less. And if we borrow less, what does that do to interest expense?
It decreases.
It decreases. So back to items that land on the income statement. Interest expense lands on the income statement. It's the interest rate on debt, which your author calls R sub D, times the change in debt. And the change in debt will equal the change in receivables at cost. We're paying an interest rate on debt of 6%. And if with the new policy, we basically can get away with borrowing about $250,000 less, then interest expense would be expected to drop. I get 15,205.
Dr. Cudd, that 253 number,
Yep.
is that without multiplying times the variable cost rate?
Yeah. Yes. That would be the change in receivables at cost.
Okay.
And whatever the change in receivables is at cost, that'll also be the change in how much we have to borrow. So if our investment in receivables goes down, we borrow less, we save some interest expense. I know this page is crowded, but I'd really like to get this on here. We expect gross profit to go up, discount costs to go down. Pardon me, discount costs to go up, bad debt costs to go up, credit department costs to go up, and interest expense to go down. Let me see if this works. Yes. So now what I want to do is put each of these items that land on the income statement, but I want to give them a sign that reflects their impact on profit. So I'm going to get a little bit of this stuff out of my way. Have a little column over here to the right. We'll do it in red. The change in gross profit, it's supposed to go up 150,000. Now I want the sign to reflect the impact on profit. Let's say, if gross profit goes up, will that have a positive effect or a negative effect on net profit?
Positive.
Positive. Another item will be discount costs. That lands on the income statement. And discount costs are expected to go up by 88,000. But if a cost item goes up, does that have a positive or a negative effect on profit?
Negative.
Negative. Bad debts. Bad debt costs, let's say, are expected to go up 65,000. But if a cost item goes up, what's the effect on profit? Negative. Then we've got our credit department cost. It's expected to go up by 20,000. But again, it's a cost item. So if it goes up, that'll have a negative effect on profit. And finally, we've got interest expense, which is expected to go down by a little over 15,000. If an expense item drops, what effect will that have on profit?
Positive.
Positive. So these are all the guys that land on the income statement. If we net them out, that tells us what the projected change in earnings before taxes would be if we switch to the new credit policy. As it works out, it looks like it would make our taxable profit actually drop, which of course would make net income drop. So does the new policy look like a bad idea? A good idea, sorry.
No.
No. Because of this, we would decide to stay with the old credit policy. How you guys holding up?
Step by step.
Okay.
I still don't see where the 70% comes in that cost calculation. It's
For this reason, if I sell an item that costs, let's say the price of an item is $100, right? I'm the company, you're a customer. If I sell it to you for $100 and I give you a certain amount of time to pay, how much did I actually have to spend to make that item? 70% of it, $70. So my actual cash investment in receivables is receivables at cost, which is 70% of whatever the selling price is. You're the business.
When I did that, I got a different number. That's why I was.
Did anybody get my figure? Oh no. Did anybody get a different number besides Lori? All right, let's double check. Everybody fact check. Crank this out for me again, if you will. Let's see, 55.
With the 70%,
Yes.
yeah, I got like 177,397. Well, the difference was the 200 and the 253,425 you had.
Then times
But
70%.
I didn't take the 70% of it. I messed up.
Yes.
All right, give me 1 second to catch up.
I think that you might be positive here.
I don't think so.
Lower would not be.
Yeah, Brianna, you got me. You're right. You know what I did? I failed to multiply by 70%. So, times 70%, this should be 177,397. Which would make the change in interest expense $10,644, which would make our final number down here even worse.
And if you would have rounded it to like the dollar amount, it would have been 98. So like the 177,398, because it was like 397.5.
I agree with you, but I didn't round here. I just went ahead. I'm getting a negative 13,356. No, still messed up in my total here. Yeah, you guys can retotal that. You see that you'll come out with an even larger decrease in earnings before taxes. Thank you, though, Lori. Thank you very much. Everyone would have wondered.
I got 12,356, Dr. Cudd.
You know what? I like it. I'm not even going to. There we go. But still, what would our decision be? Since a new policy would cause profits to go down, we'd stay with the old one.
Okay.
Thank you, guys, on the corrections there. I make math mistakes all the time. And I also need to fix these slides. very quickly. That was I'll correct these Zoom slides and repost them. Okay. Questions so far? It's a messy problem.
Is this what we're looking at for the case this week?
Yep. I think.
How do you ever guess?
Well, probably looked at the Moodle page and saw that it was listed. Credit policy case. Okay. One more topic. And that deals with the cost of bank loans. Oh, by the way, this formula that I gave you, that's not the one in the book. Your authors went off the reservation when they decided to come up with a formula for the change in the cost of receivables. The one I've given you in these slides is the one that everyone else uses. I know what they were doing, and it would only twist your mind to try to explain the difference at this point.
Thank you for having sympathy in that matter.
Well, believe it or not, the formula I've given you here is more straightforward. Okay. Short-term bank loans. Finally get there. I'll correct these figures and repost this before I go to bed tonight. Now, I do not have my animations working properly. But if you'll notice, these two formulas should look familiar to you. These are the formulas we're going to use to calculate the nominal and effective cost of bank loans. They are the same formulas we used to determine the cost of skipping a discount from a supplier. Only to make the math a little bit easier, instead of looking at days, we're going to look at months. You know, earlier we had 365 over N, where N was the number of days of credit, or the length of the loan, so to speak. For these problems, I'm simplifying and going with number of months. Let's look at a problem. We're looking at a $1,000 loan, a 6-month loan. The stated interest rate on the loan is 5%. And what we want to do is calculate what the nominal and effective rates would be depending on how the bank calculates interest. Whew, what a mess I left. All right, let's assume that the bank calculates interest on a simple interest basis. In fact, before I even get to that, let's calculate what the interest expense would be on this loan. if it's a 6-month loan, the interest rate is 5%, but we're only talking about a half year's interest. On a loan of $1,000, the interest would be $25 for 6 months. If they calculate interest on a simple interest basis, they allow the borrower to receive the full 1,000. So the nominal rate would be the dollar fees, $25, over the dollar proceeds. And in this case, I'm working with months instead of days, so that would be 12 months over. What's the maturity of the loan? How many months?
6.
6 months. And the nominal rate would work out to be 5%. The effective rate would work out to be a little bit higher. If the bank kept making the loan every 6 months, then you would actually be paying at an annual rate of 5.06%. It would be earning interest on interest.
Can you explain one more time why it's 12 over 6 in the nominal?
I'm setting these formulas up based on months.
Okay, so if it was a 1-year term, would you just put a 1 there?
Yep. We'd
Okay.
work with number of years.
Okay, but since it's short term, it'll usually be in months?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just remember that M represents the number of months of the loan.
Got
Okay?
it. Thank you.
Now, if the bank discounts the interest, what does it mean if they discount the interest? It means they make you pay it up front. They deduct it at the start of the 6-month loan period instead of the end. So instead of walking out with $1,000, you'd walk out with $975 that you can actually use. In that case, you'd be paying $25 for the use of $975 for 6 months. And that drives the interest rate up a little more. Whether you measure it in nominal terms or effective terms. What?
Common is that it's interest discounted type of loan.
It's common. It's common enough it's in all of the finance books.
What would be an example of maybe when a bank would choose to use that type of loan?
If a business wanted to take out a short-term loan, the bank could set the terms of the loans where the interest is discounted.
Okay.
It would just be the terms that the bank is offering, the terms that the borrower would have to live with if they took out the loan. And another case is where interest is discounted. And I think in my example, I said 15% compensating balances apply. In this situation, not only would the bank deduct the interest expense from your proceeds, but it would require that you leave 15% of the face value of the loan in the bank in a non-interest earning form. And that would leave you with proceeds of $825. So the nominal interest rate, you'd be paying $25 for the use of $825 that you can actually take out of the bank and use. And that drives the interest rate up even more. Whether you measure it as nominal or as effective. What I want you to notice, the objective for the bank of discounting the interest or charging compensating balances is to drive the interest rate on the loan up. Banks enforce this informally with consumers. If you want to borrow money to buy a car and you walk into a bank and talk to the loan officer, what's going to be the first question that loan officer asks you?
How
Besides-
much
How
do you
much are you putting down?
borrow?
Even before that,
Collateral?
even before that,
What's your credit look like?
even before that, you know what they're going to ask you?
What's your name?
What do you
Even
need?
before that, probably. No, they'll ask you your name. They're going to ask you, do you bank with us? Do you have your checking account with our bank? And you know what that officer will tell you if you say, no, we have our checking account with this other bank? That officer will say, well, go borrow your money from that bank. Your checking account sort of serves informally as a type of compensating balance. They may not put a percent on it, but that's how it works.
Does that work with mortgages as well?
Sure. Well, that tends to be more competitive at times, but yes. They're going to feel better about giving you a mortgage loan if you do your other banking with their bank, if you have your checking account with their bank. Again, that checking account serves informally as a type of compensating balance. What do all of these techniques, like discounting the interest and charging compensating balances, what do they do to the cost of the loan? They drive it up. Sort of a sneaky way for the bank to charge you a higher interest rate. Now, what if the bank, let's go with this. Let's say they discount the interest and they charge 15% compensating balances. If the face value of the loan is $1,000, does that give you 1,000 in usable funds? No, it only gives you 825. So another question is, do it in green. If under these conditions, if you need $1,000 in usable funds, what must be the face value of the loan? Well, one way to set it up, notice that whatever the face value of the loan is, they're going to withhold a certain portion of it as discounted interest. In this case, that would be 5%, 6 months worth of that, times the face value of the loan. And they would also withhold 15% of the face value of the loan as compensating balances. So you want the loan minus how much they withhold to leave you with $1,000. That would mean the loan would need to be I came out with 1250. No, whoa. Yeah. If you were having the interest discounted and the bank was going to withhold a portion of the loan in the form of compensating balances, to be able to walk out with $1,000 you can use, you'd have to take out a loan for $1,250. Does that make sense to you?
The concept makes sense. I'm just trying to retrace the steps of how you got there. Is that an L minus 0.05?
Yep.
Okay.
they're going to withhold 6 months of interest. That's a discounted interest. And of course, this are the compensating balances they're withholding. Now, how are we doing so far? I know it's a lot. Let me show you the nastiest thing they can do. This has been outlawed in some states. I don't know if it's been outlawed in Mississippi or not. It occurred back when interest rates were really high, and it was a method of deceptive advertising. I need to erase this, guys, but well, you got it in the video. What if the bank, one more method of charging interest, they're going to charge interest on the add-on basis. If the bank charged the interest on an add-on basis, they would ask you to pay back the loan in 6 monthly installments. But this is how they would come up with a payment. They would basically say, we want you to pay back the $1,000 plus 6 months interest and divide that by 6. Sounds very reasonable on the surface. And your monthly payments would be $170.83. But to calculate the rate you're actually paying, you'd need to use your time value of money calculator. For 6 payments, you'd pay $170.83. You'd get a loan of $1,000, no balloon payment. And if you crank that out, that works out to an interest rate of 0.71% per month. In this case, to get your annual nominal rate, you take the rate per month times 12 months. And that would work out to 8.5, Mike, what am I doing? 52%. They're advertising this as a 5% loan, and yet what you would end up paying would be, well, not quite twice that, but way above the rate they're advertising. What's actually happening is as you make each payment, this is an amortized loan. Each payment is part interest part principal. So after a month, you pay $170.83. Another month, another $170.83. And roughly halfway through the life of the loan, you've paid off half of it. So your average loan balance is approximately half of that 1,000. I don't know if this makes any sense to you or not, but the key point I want to make with an add-on basis, it is deceptive advertising. They're advertising this as a 5% interest loan when you're paying way above that because of how they calculate your payment. They're charging you interest for 6 months on the full 1,000, when on average you're borrowing about half that. Because with each payment, you're not just paying off the interest expense, you're reducing the loan balance. Now, let me make this one final statement on this. Car loans, house loans are amortized loans. You're making a series of equal payments. Each payment is part interest expense and part principal. And when you make the last payment, you've paid off the loan. But not all amortized loans at all charge interest on the add-on basis. So if a lender charges interest on the add-on basis, it will be an amortized loan. But almost all loans that are amortized loans do not have the interest based on the add-on basis.
So just practically speaking, assuming this is not illegal in Mississippi, how do you catch this? Just by running it through the
I tell you what.
APV in your calculator?
Yep, that's one way. Actually, on the loan document, they're required to put the APR. It's typically in the lower right-hand corner. And they would have to put, in this case, 8.52%. I'm told a really deceptive practice that some car dealers that provided financing would do, you're going to love this, is the finance officer would basically say, let me hold that for you while you sign it, and their thumb would be over the APR, you know, covering it up. Back in the early 80s, interest rates went through the roof. Late 70s, early 80s, home loans had interest rates in the upper teens. Auto loans had interest rates in the upper teens and higher. And that's when this practice of add-on interest was rampant. Most car dealers practiced it. Most businesses that sold home appliances where you made monthly payments practiced this. They would basically advertise their loan at a lot lower rate than they were actually charging. And that's called the add-on basis. Do you guys have it in you to handle one more slide before we adjourn? Or are your brains full right now?
It's pretty full. Are you going to talk about the case before we finish?
Not really. There's not much to talk about the case. The case is very straightforward.
Good.
Yeah. It is very straightforward. That credit policy problem I just went through is more complicated than the case.
All right.
Yeah, this will be one of the easiest cases of the semester for you. I tell you what, let's stop. I've got another slide on revolving credit, but I'm kind of worn out too. Oh my gosh, we've gone over 2 hours. Let's do stop. Any final questions? In fact, who's left? Oh, you're all there. All right. Diehards, do you have any questions before we adjourn? Brian, Bailey, TC, I didn't even know you were there. Caitlin, Jeff, Lori, Brianti.
I'm good.
Bailey, that came out like bad static. Sorry.
I'm good. I don't have any questions.
Okay, guys. If you have questions over the week, by all means, send them to me. Email me, write them out, whatever. And if you're done, I'm done. I'll end the meeting. All right, you guys have a good week.
Good night, Dr.
Thanks, you too, Dr. Cudd.
Dude, thank you.
Yep, I hope you get to feeling better. Jeff's got the flu.
Feel better, Jeff.
Thank
Ooh,
y'all.
yeah.
All right, good night, y'all.
Strong.
Good night.